This is a lecture from Open Tuition. For the free slides that go with this podcast, please visit opentuition.com.
Charles Handy identified 4 types of organizational culture. Each of these categories was given the name of a Greek god. I don't think those names are very useful, but you ought to know them for the exam anyhow. First, there is the power culture. In the power culture, power is concentrated in the hands of essentially one person, the boss. Probably the person who started the company, or at least a person whose name is probably the same as the company. This person's word is law. There's very little delegation, very little decentralization. Almost all decisions are made by that person. It becomes difficult to sustain a power culture as the business grows. There's simply too much to know and too much to do. And they may then change into a role culture. In a role culture, there's effectively a management structure with different people having different roles. The problem with a role culture is that sometimes the title, the job, is regarded as more important than actually getting the job done. Often associated with the role culture are very strict job specifications. And if something isn't on a specification, then people will refuse to do it, even if it hurts a client or customer. The task culture is where there's a great emphasis on getting the job done and achieving the task. People do not depend so much on their job specifications or their particular place in a hierarchy. Really, everyone pulls together for the sake of the organization and to please clients and customers. A relatively rare type of culture is the person organization. Here you have people who are essentially pursuing a private ambition in the context of an organization. It's not very important in business. An example might be a surgeon in a hospital. The surgeon gets enormous job satisfaction from performing operations and making people better. To some extent they may not be terribly interested in interacting with the rest of the organization. They are there primarily to fill their personal ambitions, and the rest of the organization is almost an essential evil. Shine usefully identified 3 levels of culture. The topmost and most superficial level is that of artifacts. These are essentially what you see, the way people dress, the way they behave, the structure of the company as set out in the organization chart, the way in which you have to have your expenses approved. These are the most obvious things that you see when you join an organization, but in some ways the least important. At a slightly deeper level are espoused values. These are the stated goals, strategies and philosophies. The mission statement of a company, for example, may set out what the company's purpose is and how it perceives itself within the marketplace, how it values employees, how it tries not to harm the environment. The most fundamental level are the basic underlying assumptions. These are very important, but are often the most difficult to identify and to understand. They will often not be stated, but there is an assumption about the quality of work, about never missing deadlines, about a willingness to work overtime even if not paid in order to hit a deadline. The assumption perhaps that we are the best, and it can take time before these basic underlying assumptions are understood by new members of organizations. Hofstede examined how people from different countries are likely to develop different organizational cultures. That national culture influences how people work and expect to be managed. Hofstede identified the following variables. power distance. Do people expect to be told what to do and then do it without question? Or do people come from a national culture where that approach would not be expected and probably not be acceptable, where they expect to have a more participative role, to contribute to decisions? The second variable was uncertainty avoidance. Some national cultures shy away from taking risks. Those people may prefer certainty. They don't come from a background which expects people to take gambles and which supports failure. It's sometimes said that the American business culture is one where failure, and effectively therefore uncertainty, is well tolerated, that there's no disgrace in trying and failing, that the only disgrace is in not trying. And it could be that this is what partly contributes to the dynamism of the American economy. Third, individualism, collectivism. To what extent are all people within the organization expected to agree with particular decisions, to conform with what other people are doing, or are they expected to go their own way? To a large extent, Japanese culture expects collectivism. Everyone is expected to agree in what's being done, and an individual approach is frowned upon. In some countries, individual approaches are likely to be praised. They have great respect for the maverick. Masculinity looks at the extent to which social gender roles are important. Cultures with high masculinity value assertiveness, competition, material success, and being dominant. Whereas in those cultures, feminine values of modesty, reaching consensus, understanding, and relationships are not valued so highly.